Welcome to the Importance of Communication. My name is Dr. Keith L. Anderson. I'm founder of Anderson Diversity and Communication, and I can be found at www.anderson-diversity.com. Last night, I watched a news story about a man who had been wrongly put into prison for over 20 years. The main eyewitness recanted, and they found evidence of wrongdoing by the prosecuting attorney. The man had been released for a few months, and the reporter had come back, and he just wanted to see how the man was doing. When asked what were some of the things he had to adjust to, he quickly noted that people don't seem to have the ability to communicate person to person anymore. I found that very, very interesting. Today I'm going to talk to you about communication. The ability to communicate from person to person has long been a problem in this country. So today my goal is to define communication, identify problems in communication, and give you a few pointers on how to communicate more effectively. Hopefully, more effective communication skills will allow you to be able to better assist clients. I have a question. What is the number one reason for divorce in America? Well, according to the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers, the number one reason for divorce in America isn't domestic abuse. We hear so much about failing economy, and we know couples argue over money, but money isn't the number one reason either. According to the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers study, 67.5% of all marriages fail because of a breakdown in their communication. In this country, we have a communication problem. We don't communicate with each other very well. Even with people we love, we don't communicate very well. Therefore, in order to be an effective mediator for couples in divorce situations, mediators must have, at the very least, a working knowledge of what human communication is. So let's start by defining communication. What is human communication? Human communication is the face-to-face process of imparting, conveying, or exchange of ideas, knowledge, and information. So let's dissect this a little bit. Human communication is face-to-face. We all know that we communicate in many different ways. In this computer and internet age, we can communicate and not be face-to-face. So it's important to understand that in the human communication process, we're talking face-to-face. Second, communication is a process. Like with most processes, things have to happen in a certain way throughout the communication process in order for the communication to be successful. If certain things don't happen throughout the communication process, then communication between individuals will be unsuccessful. What we have then is what we heard in the movie, a failure to communicate. This failure to communicate is the very communication failure that the American Academy of Matrimonial Lawyers says causes 67.5% of divorces. So let's talk about what can cause communication failures. There are several problems inherent with human communication. These problems cause communication failure. First, people think that just because we have a mouth and ears, we all communicate effectively. Second, most people don't know the difference between hearing and listening. Third, we don't recognize the different styles of communication in regards to different cultures. Next, too many people think communication via computer, smartphone, and internet is the same as face-to-face communication. Because it is convenient, we don't want to admit the added difficulties with communicating electronically. Now that you have an understanding of what communication is and the problem with human communication, let's talk about a few types and styles of human communication. Types of communication. Most people don't understand that there are several types of communication. interpersonal, intrapersonal, interracial, intercultural, to name a few. That interpersonal communication is that communication with another person. The intracultural communication is that communication with oneself. Interracial communication is that communication between people of different races. Intercultural communication is the communication styles and lifestyles and language styles from people from different cultures. Know what type of communication situation you're in. And you know that by understanding the style of communications. There are also styles such as linear communication, interactive communication, and transactional communication. Let's take a look at them. Linear communication is like a one-way talking at someone rather than to or with someone. And this is affectionately known as the divorce communication. It's like throwing a frisbee in the air one way and not having anybody give any feedback. It's not coming back at you. The next model of communication or type of communication is interactive. That's the type of communication where you talk, I listen, then I talk, and you listen. It's much like playing catch with a ball. Okay? Transactional communication, it's sort of a talking with no structure, but still all individuals are allowed to participate. And you see this a lot with younger kids nowadays. So let's talk about mediating through communication. It is very obvious that there is a correlation between providing successful mediation and communicating effectively. Even their definitions are similar. Mediation is a process for resolving disputes where an intermediary helps conflicting parties for a conversation to jointly resolve their concerns. Human communication is the face-to-face process of imparting, conveying, and exchanging ideas, knowledge, and information, etc. So to sum this up, I use a saying when I work with teachers. I say, we have to reach them to teach them. In essence, what I'm saying is to you, when working with people via communication, the more effective the communication is within the mediation, the higher the likelihood of reaching resolutions. Mediation is about communication, which is about understanding that the meaning of what people say is within the person saying it, not the words they use. So it is important to get to know what people mean. So how do we communicate better? Here are some steps to communicating better during mediation. There are steps designed to improve communication in mediation situations. To improve communication, step to effective listening skills and understanding of perceptions, I should say, is vital. These communication skills can be taught to and used during client and mediator sessions. Or mediators can teach these communication skills to their clients in order to help them reconcile differences that may arise during mediation. Let's look at listening. Listening as opposed to hearing. Try this. I want everyone to stop, close your eyes, and listen to the sounds in the room you're in. Some of you may hear the hum of a computer or the ventilation from a heating system or air conditioner. Some of you may hear the sounds of traffic outside your building or the chatter of people outside the door. The point is, those sounds were always there. You heard them, but you just weren't listening to them. In fact, we can't listen to everything we hear. That's because listening involves focusing, and we can't focus on everything at once. Try this. While not being able to reconcile differences in the number reasons for communication, the number one reason for not being able to reconcile differences is not listening. Think back to when you and a significant other tried to communicate with you and you weren't paying attention. I can't tell you how many times my wife has waited until I'm watching TV to tell me about a family event. Then a week later, she gets frustrated at me when I've planned something else because I didn't remember her telling me about the family event. Have you ever yelled back to your kid's room for him or her to do something? You actually hear them say, okay. But when an hour goes by, they still haven't done what you've asked them to do. In fact, they swear you never told them to do anything. The problem is, with all the scenarios I've mentioned, is we assume hearing and listening are the same, and they're not the same thing. Just like communication itself, listening is a process. It requires a person to put forth effort. I need to repeat that. Listening requires effort. Hearing does not require effort. If you have ears that work, you hear. However, listening goes beyond just hearing. Here are a few don't do behaviors that will interfere with successful listening and the mediation process. Don't be a selective listener. Listen to everything the speaker says and don't only respond to things that are only of interest to you. Don't be a pretender listener, a person who looks as if they're listening but aren't. This causes a person to make comments that the speaker already covered. This also causes them to be totally off topic. Don't be an ambusher, a person who listens to find fault in the speaker. And don't be an ultra-sensitive listener, a person who takes offense to pretty much everything that comes out the mouth of the speaker. And then don't be an "it's about me" listener. This is the type of person who will interrupt a speaker, take anything the speaker says, and make it about themselves. Here are a few things to do that enhance listening in the mediation process. Pay attention to this person speaking. Even in hostile situations, when the speaker feels someone is paying attention to them, there's room for better communication. Understand the person speaking. Acknowledging another person's perceptions enhances communication. Respond to the person speaking. Before bringing up your own new points, respond to the speaker's points. Remember what the speaker had to say. When possible, incorporate something the speaker said in your response. Listen with a purpose. If you set goals to your listening process based on what the speaker is saying, you're more likely to pay better attention. Listen with an open mind. By listening to exactly what the speaker is saying and not focusing on your own perspective, you will be able to learn more information. Here's things to remember during mediation and communication. Make sure the communication is meaningful during mediation. This is done by listening carefully to what is being said. This is also done by asking questions and clarifying. The meaning of what people say is within the person saying, not in the words they use. Communication, no matter how good it is, can't solve everything. Sometimes mediation is about people getting to agree to the point where they agree to disagree. And sometimes less communication is more communication. During mediation, know when communication is doing more harm than good. Well, I hope this information about communication has been helpful to you. There's plenty of information around that can help you understand the communication process a little more.